Welcome back, everybody. How's everybody doing? Just setting up the stream here. How's the sound? It sounds pretty decent. Don't think that the vacuum cleaner sound is coming in, but let me just check about that. Well, I don't think that it is coming in on the mic right now, but that's okay. I just let me know if it is. Yeah. Anyway, I was recommended this book by a close friend of mine, and it's called The Minority Report, by a guy named Philip K. Dix, I think. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, apparently this is like one of his more popular books, I think. Let me just confirm that as well. Okay, Dick, popular books. I'm not sure. I found this one just by going through the pages and just there was one of these that mentioned that the Minority Report was one of the books that he was most popular for, and that's why I chose it. But I guess I could probably do another different book at some point in the future, depending on how people want to respond to this stuff, I think. Let's see here. Um, Majority and minority reports. Each of the three precogs generates its own report or prediction. The reports of all the precogs are analyzed by a computer. I don't think this has. Is this related? Series, the minority questions the existence of free will. The title refers to the dissenting opinion of one of the precogs. What is a precog? Precognitives are individuals that possess a psychic ability to see events in the future, primarily premeditated. So they can see their own premeditated murders or other people's premeditated murders. Am I understanding that correctly? Minority Report is a 2002 American cyberpunk action film directed by Steven Spielberg, loosely based on Philip K. Dick's 1956 novella, The Minority Report. Okay. The Minority Report synopsis. By the way, huge, spoiler warning. I mean, obviously, but in case that wasn't obvious for you. Um, yeah, let's see this plot summary. Um, then we can continue. And I had read somewhere that this was only going to take like 2 hours of reading. The Minority Report reading. Yeah, so apparently this says that it should only take like, let's say I read at 250 words per minute on stream. The book would take an estimated 103 minutes to read at reading speed. With 30 minutes a day, this would take 4 days to read. See, this is interesting to me because it says page count is 103 pages, but the one that I have pulled up here is 227. So my guess is that somewhere along the line of me finding this book, I probably just found the wrong one. In which case, I'm actually gonna go see if I can find the correct one to read here. The Minority Report. Yeah, let's take a look at this. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell um, which one of these is actually the correct one, just because there are so many options. Okay, let's see what we can find. In the meantime, we got these Cozy Shack, whatchamacallits. It's not rice pudding, these ones actually. These are um, tapioca rice puddings, apparently. So slightly different than what you would expect. Anyway, some of the issues I have with this book is I kind of don't know where to start. Um, to be fairly frank, 103 minutes is very short amount of time to read. So this should be like a short like novel, like novella as it said. This one that I found is like huge. It's just massive, and I don't really get it. So we're just gonna go to the glossary here and just kind of understand what's going on. Okay. So it says the Minority Report and other classic stories. So I'm just assuming that there's a lot of stories in here, and the one that we really do want to care about is this one. So I think I'm probably just going to start here and do the read through. Should be about like 20 or so pages to go through here. And then afterwards, we can loop back, think about what we just read. I'll probably take some notes along the way. And then we can go about maybe writing a little like blog post about it on my website. I still got to finish up that Duckwell stuff that I was working on earlier, but other than that, um, yeah, it's ready to go with most of the new blog stuff. So it'll be fun. I'm not sure what to write, other than that I will write something, and that's the whole point of the blog is just to write something. And then later on, I guess, just with time and whatnot, it'll get easier. I'll get to become a better writer and whatnot, and yeah, it'll just generally become more fun. I'm very competitive, so um, if I feel like I'm getting good at something, all the better. I like it. Motivates me to work harder at it. Okay. Um, I see we have someone tuning in. Hello. So yeah, let's I guess start with reading the book here. I'm gonna have the book up on the screen right now. Yep, good. Feel free to comment through as we're reading this, and I'll try to respond to your comments as they come along. Okay, so the Minority Report. There was 9 chapters, I think. Okay. The first thought Anderton had when he saw the young man was, I'm getting bald. Bald and fat and old. But he didn't say it out loud. Instead, he pushed back his chair, got to his feet, and came resolutely around the side of his desk, his right hand rigidly extended. Smiling with forced amiability, he shook hands with the young man. Whitwer? He asked, managing to make this query sound gracious. That's right, the young man said. But the name's Ed to you, of course. That is, if you share my dislike for needless formality. The look on the blond, overly confident face showed that he considered the matter settled. It would be Ed and John. Everything would be agreeably cooperative right from the start. Did you have any trouble finding the building? Anderton asked guardedly, ignoring the too friendly overture. Good God, he had to hold on to something. Fear touched him as he began to sweat. Whitwer was moving around the office as if he already owned it, as if he were measuring it up for size. Couldn't he wait a couple of days? A decent interval? No trouble, Whitwer answered blithely, his hands in his pockets. Eagerly examined the voluminous files that lined the wall. I'm not coming to your agency blind, you understand. I have quite a few ideas of my own about how the way pre-crime is run. Shakily, Anderson lit his pipe. How's it run? I should like to know. Not badly, Woodward said. In fact, quite well. Anderton regarded him steadily. Is that your private opinion, or is it just cant? Whitwer met his gaze That's a weird word. Guilelessly. Private and public. The Senate's pleased with your work. In fact, they're enthusiastic, he added. As enthusiastic as very old men can be. Anderton winced, but outwardly he remained impassive. It costed him effort, though. He wondered what Whitwer really thought. What was actually going on in that close-cropped skull? The young man's eyes were blue, bright, and disturbingly clever. Whitwer was nobody's fool, and obviously he had a great deal of ambition. As I understand it, Anderson said cautiously, you're going to be my assistant until I retire. That's my understanding too, the other replied, without an instant's hesitation. Which may be the year, or the next year, or 10 years from now. The pipe in Anderson's hand trembled. I'm under no compulsion to retire. I found a pre-crime. and I can stay on here as long as I want. It's purely my decision. Whitwer nodded, his expression still guileless. Of course. With an effort, Anderton cooled down a trifle. I merely wanted to get things straight from the start. Whitwer agreed. You're the boss. What you say goes. With every evidence of sincerity, he asked, would you care to show me the organization? I'd like to familiarize myself with the general routine as soon as possible. As they walked along the busy, yellow-lit tiers of offices, Anderton said, you're acquainted with the theory of pre-crime, of course. I presume we can take that for granted? I have the information publicly available, Whitwer replied. With the aid of your precog mutants and your boldly and successfully abolished the post-crime punitive system of jails and fines. As we all realized, punishment was never much of a deterrent and could scarcely have afforded to comfort to a victim already dead. They had come to the descent lift as it carried them swiftly downward. Anderton said, you probably grasp the basic legalistic drawback to pre-crime methodology. We're taking in individuals who have broken no law. But surely they will, Whitwer affirmed with conviction. Happily, they don't, because we got them first, before they can commit any violence. So the commission of the crime itself is absolute metaphysics. We claim they're culpable. They, on the other hand, eternally claim that they're innocent. And in a sense, they are innocent. The lift let them out, and they again paced down the yellow corridor. In our society, we have no major crimes, Anderton went on, but we do have detention camp full of would-be criminals. Doors opened and closed, and they were in the analytical wing. Ahead of them rose impressive banks of equipment, the data receptors and the computing mechanisms that studied and restructured the incoming material. And beyond the machinery sat three precogs, almost lost to view in the maze of wiring. There they are, Anderson said dryly. What do you think of them? In the gloomy half-darkness, the three idiots sat babbling. Every incoherent utterance, every random syllable was analyzed, compared, reassembled in the form of visual symbols, transcribed onto conventional punch cards, and ejected into various coded slots. All day long the idiots babbled, imprisoned in their special high-backed chairs, held in one rigid position by metal bands and bundles of wiring and clamps. Their physical needs were taken care of automatically. They had no spiritual needs. Vegetable-like, they muttered and dozed and existed. Their minds were dull, confused, lost in the shadows. But not the shadows of today. The three gibbering, fumbling creatures with their enlarged head and wasted bodies were contemplating the future. Their animal machinery was recording prophecies, and as the three precog idiots talked, the machinery carefully listened. For the first time, Whitwer's face lost its breezy confidence. A sick, dismayed expression crept into his eyes, a mixture of shame and moral shock. That's not pleasant, he murmured. I didn't realize they were so. He groped for his mind for the right word, gesticulating. So deformed. Deformed and retarded, Anderson instantly agreed. Especially the girl there. Donna is 45 years old, but she looks about 10. The talent absorbs everything. The S lobe shrivels the balance of the frontal area. But what do we care? We get their prophecies, they pass on what they need. They don't understand any of it, but we do. Subdued, Whitwer crossed the room to the machinery. From a slot he collected a stack of cards. Are these names that have come up? He asked. Obviously. Frowning, Anderton took the stack from him. I haven't had a chance to examine them, he explained, impatiently concealing his annoyance. Fascinated, Whitwer watched the machinery pop a fresh card into the now empty slot. It was followed by a second, and a third. From the whirring disc came one card after another. The precogs must see quite far in the future, Whitwer explained. They see a quite limited span, Anderton informed him. 1 week or two ahead at the very most. Much of their data is worthless to us, simply not relevant to our line. We pass it on to the appropriate agencies, and they in turn trade data with us. Every important bureau has its cellar of treasure monkeys. Monkeys? Whitworth stared at it uneasily. Oh, yes, I understand. See no evil, speak no evil, etc. Very amusing. Very apt, automatically. Anderson collected the fresh cards which had been churned up by the spinning machinery. Some of these names will be totally discarded, and most of the remainder records petty crimes, thefts, income tax evasion, assault, extortion. As I'm sure you know, pre-crime has cut down on felonies by 99 and decimal point 83.8%. We seldom get actual murder or treason. After all, the culprit knows we'll confine him in the detention camp a week before he gets a chance to commit the crime. When was the last time an actual murder was committed? We were asked. 5 years ago, Anderton said, pride in his voice. And how did that happen? The criminal escaped our teams. We had his name. In fact, we had all the details of the crime, including the victim's name. We knew the exact moment, the location of the planned act of violence. But in spite of us, he was able to carry it out. Anderton shrugged. After all, we can't get all of them. He riffled the cards, but we do get most. One murder in 5 years. Whitworth's confidence was returning. Quite an impressive record, something to be proud of. Quietly, Anderton said, I am proud. 33 years ago, I worked out the theory. Back in the days when the self-seekers were thinking in terms of quick raids on the stock market, I saw something legitimate ahead, something of tremendous social value. He tossed a packet of cards to the Wally page, his subordinate in charge of the monkey block. See which ones we want, he told him. Use your own judgment. As Page disappeared with the cards, Whitworth said thoughtfully, It's a big responsibility. Yes, it is, Anderson agreed. If we let one criminal escape, as we did 5 years ago, we've got a human life on our conscience. We're solely responsible. If we slip up, somebody dies. Bitterly, he jerked three new cards on the slot. It's public trust. Are you tempted to? Whitworth hesitated. I mean, some of the men you pick up must offer you plenty. It won't do any good. A duplicate file of cards pops out at Army GHQ. It's checked and balanced. They keep their eye on us as continuously as they wish. So even if we wanted to accept that, he broke off, lips tightening. What's the matter? Whitwer asked curiously. Carefully, Anderton folded up the top card and put it away in his pocket. Nothing, he muttered. Nothing at all. The harshness in his voice brought a flush to Whitworth's face. You really don't like me, he observed. True, Anderson admitted. I don't, but he couldn't believe he disliked the young man that much. It didn't seem possible. It wasn't possible. Something was wrong. Dazed, he tried to steady his tumbling mind. On the card was his name, line one, an already accused future murderer. According to the coded punches, pre-crime Commissioner John A. Anderton was going to kill a man, and within a week, with absolute, overwhelming conviction, he didn't believe it. Okay, so 5 pages in of this short story, I'm already getting lots of. So who do we have here? We have basically the pre-crime commissioner, so Commissioner Anderton, coming into the scene here, our protagonist in this, and as I guess our dutagonist here is probably Whitwer, which he is some sort of disciple or apprentice to Anderton. Uh, Already this gives me kind of vibes of like Psycho-Pass. If you've ever seen that show Psycho-Pass, it's an anime, really good anime on psychological thinking. It essentially goes about how there are a set of brains, a set of computers that dictate your psycho level. And if your psycho level exceeds a threshold, you're put into a re-education camp of sorts. And if you get stressed, people get stressed going into those places, and so their psycho levels keep spiking and spiking, and they get accused and they get put into these cells for crimes they never ever committed. And I think part of that is just it coming down to a analogy of how our current society works in such ways. Like we have ways that we convict people for crimes that maybe we don't even know if they 100% committed, but somebody said they did, and that's reason enough to convict them. Totally, tons of evidence of this. I mean, take a look at all the people who did like DNA stuff. People in jail since like 19 up to like 56, lost their entire life to this stuff. So it's already giving me those kinds of vibes here, which is actually really interesting. I like this so far. By the way, I've never read the Minority Report, or I've never watched the film either, so this is all brand new, but it's already giving me those psychopath vibes. Okay, let's continue on. Chapter 2. In the outer office, talking to Paige, stood Anderton's slim and attractive young wife, Lisa. She was engaged in a sharp, animated discussion of policy, and barely glanced up as Whitwer and her husband entered. Yeah, it's nice. Hello, darling, Anderton said. Whitwer remained silent, but his pale eyes flickered slightly as they rested on the brown-haired woman uh, in her trim police uniform. Lisa was now an executive official of the pre-crime once, Whitwer knew, but she had been Anderton's secretary. Ooh, scandalous. Noticing the interest on Whitwer's face, Anderton paused and reflected. To plant the card in the machines would require an accomplice on the inside, someone who is closely connected with pre-crime and had already had access to the analytical equipment. Lisa was an improbable element, but the possibility did exist. Of course, the conspiracy could be large-scale and elaborate, involving far more than a rigged card inserted somewhere along the line. The original data itself might have been tampered with. Actually, there was no telling how far back the alteration went. A cold fear touched him as he began to see the possibilities. His original impulse to tear open the machines and remove all the data was uselessly primitive. Probably the tapes agreed with the card. He would only incriminate himself further. Yeah, see, that's the thing with psychopaths too. He had approximately 24 hours. Then the army people would check over their cards and discover the discrepancy. They would find in their files a duplicate of the card he had appropriated. He had only one of two copies, which meant that the folded card in his pocket might as well just be lying on Page's desk in plain view of everyone. From the outside, from the outside of the building came the drone of police cars starting out on their routine roundups. How many hours would elapse before one of them pulled up in front of his house? I can't do a woman's voice. What's the matter, darling? Lisa asked him uneasily. You look as if you've just seen a ghost. Are you all right? I'm fine, he reassured her. Lisa suddenly seemed to become aware of Ed Whitwer's admiring scrutiny. Is this the gentleman of your new coworker, darling? She asked. Warily, Anderton introduced his new associate. Lisa smiled in a friendly greeting. Did a covert awareness pass between them? He couldn't tell. God, he was beginning to suspect everybody, not only his wife and Whitwer, but a dozen members of his staff. Are you from New York? Lisa asked. No, Whitwer replied. I've lived in most of my life in Chicago. I'm staying at a hotel, one of the big downtown hotels. Wait, I have the name written on the card somewhere. While he self-consciously searched his pocket, Lisa suggested, perhaps you'd like to have dinner with us. We'll be working in close cooperation, and I think we really ought to get better acquainted. Startled, Anderton backed off. What were the chances, his wife's friendliness being benign, accidental? Whitwer would present the balance of the evening, and would now have an excuse to trail along to Anderton's private residence. Profoundly disturbed, he turned impulsively and moved toward the door. Where are you going? Lisa asked, astonished. Back to the monkey block, he told her. I want to check over some rather puzzling data tapes before the army sees them. He was out in the corridor before she could think of a plausible reason for detaining him. Rapidly, he made his way to the ramp and at its far end. He was striding down the outside of the stairs toward the public sidewalk when Lisa appeared breathlessly behind him. What on earth has come over you? Catching hold of his arm, she quickly moved in front of him. I knew you were leaving, she exclaimed, blocking his way. What's wrong with you? Everybody thinks you're. She checked herself. I mean, you're acting so erratically. People surged by them, the usual afternoon crowd. Ignoring them, Anderton pried his wife's fingers from his arm. I'm getting out, he told her. While there's still time. But why? I'm being framed, deliberately and maliciously. The creature is out to get my job. The Senate is getting at me through him. Lisa gazed up at him, bewildered. But he seems such a nice young man. Nice as a water moccasin. Lisa's dismay turned into disbelief. I don't believe it. Darling, all this strain you've been under. Smiling uncertainly, she faltered. It's really not credible that Ed Whitwer is trying to frame you. How could he? Even if he wanted to, surely Ed wouldn't. Ed? That's his name, isn't it? His brown eyes flashed startled. Wildly incredulous protest. Good heavens! You're suspicious of everybody. You actually believe I'm mixed up in some way, don't you? He considered. I'm not sure. She drew closer to him, her eyes accusing. That's not true. You really believe it. Maybe you ought to go away for a few weeks. You desperately need a rest. All this tension and trauma, a younger man coming in. You're acting paranoid. Can't you see that? People plotting against you? Tell me, do you have any actual proof? Anderton removed his wallet and took out a folded card. Examine this carefully, he said, handing it to her. The color drained out of her face, and she gave a little harsh, dry gasp. The setup is fairly obvious, Anderton told her, as levelly as he could. This will give Whitwer a legal pretext to remove me right now. He won't have to wait till I resign. Grimly, he added. They know I'm good for a few years yet. But it will be the end of the check and balance system. Pre-crime will no longer be an independent agency. The Senate will control the police, and after that, flip Sidon, they'll absorb the army too. Well, it's outwardly logical enough. Of course, I feel hostility and resentment toward Whitwer. Of course, I have a motive. Nobody likes to be replaced by a younger man and find himself turned to the pasture. It's really all quite possible. Except I don't have the remotest intention of killing Whitwer, but I can't prove that, so what can I do? Muted, mutedly, her face very white, Lisa shook her head. I, I don't know, darling. If only. Right now, Anderson said abruptly, I'm going home to pack my things. That's about as far ahead as I can plan. You're really going to try to hide us out? I am, as far as the Centaurian colony planets, if necessary. It's been done successfully before, and a 24-hour head start. He turned resolutely. Go back inside. There's no point in you coming with me. Did you imagine I would? Lisa asked huskily. Startled, Anderson stared at her. Wouldn't you? Then, with amazement, he murmured, No, I can see you don't believe me. You still think I'm imagining all this. He jabbed savagely at the card. Even with that evidence, you still aren't convinced. No, Lisa agreed quickly. I'm not. You didn't look at it closely enough, darling. Ed Whitwer's name isn't on it. Incredulous, Anderton took the card from her. Nobody says you're going to kill Ed Whitwer, continued rapidly in a pale, brittle voice. The card must be genuine. Understand? It has nothing to do with Ed. He's not plotting against you, and neither is anybody else. Too confused to reply, Anderton stood studying the card. She was right. Edward Whitwer was not listed as a victim. On line 5, the machine had neatly stamped another name. Leopold Kaplan. Numbly, he pocketed the card. He had never heard of this man in his life. Interesting. So the machines, in this case, they basically say all the crimes come out, like the precogs. They basically just come up with all the crimes, and it's mostly just violent crimes that they care about. And I guess then they said not even things like basic assault or stuff like that. And so he's going to deliberately murder a guy he doesn't know, with maybe 2 weeks to get to know this guy. What the fuck? Uh, so he's a sociopath. Because I think like the majority of all murders are in some way like premeditated. Nobody just goes out and says, "Well, shit, it's time to fucking kill somebody." Um, yeah, that just seems very, very profoundly weird. Either I don't even know if it's that at some point. What about like the plea to insanity? If he doesn't know the guy, how could he have been like? How could it possibly been premeditated? Yeah, something to think about. I don't know how psychopaths actually address that. I can't remember. I think it was just the fact that literally any crime could get you fucked up in psychopaths, where literally just it's like that thing with Beetlejuice. Have you ever heard like the idea like if you say Beetlejuice three times fast, he'll appear, and you tell yourself not to try to do that, but then you keep like saying the name in your head, and it's almost like you gotta say it three times in your head, and it actually becomes a challenge until you can distract yourself. I think it's like the same thing here. Like, and the same thing in Psychopaths too, because you keep telling yourself you're not gonna be able to do it, and then you eventually do it. Interesting stuff. Um, Yeah. Okay, so now we got a new person in the mix, Lisa, who's Anderton's wife. Um, Also weird like choice of name. I guess they mistyped like the S to a T and called him Anderton instead of Anderson. Um, Anderton just does not flow very well off my tongue. Um, but cool name, I guess. And Ed Whitwer, and then this new guy that we don't know yet, and we've never seen him, Leopold Kaplan. Okay, let's keep reading. Maybe we'll figure out um, why he would just consider just murdering a guy he doesn't know. Okay, chapter 3. The house is cool and deserted, and almost immediately Anderton began making his preparations for his journey. While he packed, frantic thoughts passed through his mind. Probably he was wrong about Whitwer, but how could we be sure? In any event, the conspiracy against him was far more complex than he had realized. Whitwer, in the overall picture, might merely be an insignificant puppet animated by somebody else, by some distant and distinct figure, only vaguely visible in the background. See, what a stupid thing to accuse the first person that comes into your life of trying to fuck you over. It had been a mistake to show the car to Lisa. Undoubtedly, she would describe it in detail to Whitwer. He'd never get off the Earth, never have an opportunity to find out what life a frontier planet might be like. While he was thus preoccupied, a board creaked behind him. He turned from the bed, clutching a weather-stained winter sports jacket to the muzzle of a gray Blue A pistol. "It didn't take you long," he said, staring with a bitterness at the tight-lipped, heavy-set man in a brown overcoat who stood holding the gun in his gloved hand. Didn't she even hesitate? The intruder's face registered no response. "I don't know what you said. I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Come along with me." Startled, Anderton laid down the sports jacket. "You're not from my agency. You're not a police officer." Protesting and astonished, he was hustled out of the room, waiting to a waiting limousine. Instantly, three heavily armed men closed in behind him. The door slammed, and the car shot off down the highway, away from the city. Impassive and remote, the faces around him jogged with the motion of the speeding vehicle as open fields, dark and somber, swept past. Anderton was still trying futilely to grasp the implications of what had just happened when the car came to a rutted side road, turned off, and descended into a gloomy subsurface garage. Somebody shouted an order. The heavy metal lock grated shut and overhead lights blinked on. The driver turned off the car motor. You'll have reason to regret this, Anderson warned hoarsely, as they dragged him from the car. Do you realize who I am? We realize, the man in the brown overcoat said. At gunpoint, Anderson was marched upstairs from the clammy silence of a garage into a deep carpeted hallway. He was apparently in a luxurious private residence set out in the war-devoured rural area. At the far end of the hallway he could make out a room, a book-lined study simply but tastefully furnished. In a circle of lamplight, his face partly in shadows, a man he had never met sat waiting for him. As Anderton approached, the man nervously slipped a pair of rimless glasses in place, snapped the case shut, and moistened his dry lips. He was elderly, perhaps 70 or older, and under his arm was a slim silver cane. His body was thin, wiry, and his attitude curiously rigid. What little hair he had was dusty brown, a carefully smoothed sheen of neutral color above his pale, bony skull. Only his eyes seemed to really alert. "Is this Anderton?" he inquired, curiously, turning to the man in the brown overcoat. "Where did you pick him up?" "At his home," the other replied. "He was packing, as we expected." The man at the desk shivered visibly. "Packing?" He took off his glasses and jerkily returned them to their case. "Look here," he said bluntly to Anderton. "What's the matter with you? Are you hopelessly insane? How could you kill a man you've never met?" The old man, Anderton realized, was Leopold Kaplan. "First, I'll ask you a question," Anderton countered rapidly. "Do you realize what you've done? I'm the commissioner of police. I can have you sent up for 20 years." He was going to say more, but a sudden wonder cut him off short. "How did you find out?" he demanded. Involuntarily his hand went to his pocket where the folded card was hidden. "It won't be for another—" "I wasn't notified through your agency, thank you very much," Kaplan broke in, with an angry impatience. "The fact you've never heard of me doesn't surprise me too much. Leopold Kaplan, the General of the Army of the Federated West Bloc Alliance." Begrudgingly, he added, "Retired since the end of the Anglo-Chinese War and the abolishment of the AFWA. Technically, it would be Anglo-Sino War or Sino-Anglo War, not Anglo-Chinese. We never use Chinese when we're describing that region because anthropologically they're called Sinids, like Oriental people. But I digress. Just thought I'd put it out there. It made sense. Anderton had suspected that the army processed its duplicate cards immediately for its own protection. Relaxing somewhat, he demanded, "Well, you've got me here. What next?" "Evidently," Kaplan said, "I'm not going to have you destroyed or have been shown up on one of those miserable little cards. I'm curious about you. It seemed to me, it seemed incredible to me that a man of your stature could contemplate the cold-blooded murder of a total stranger. There must be something more here. Frankly, I'm puzzled. If it represented some kind of police strategy," he shrugged his thin shoulders, "surely you wouldn't have permitted duplicate card to reach us. Unless," one of his messages said, "it's a deliberate plan." Kaplan raised his bright, bird-like eyes and scrutinized Anderton. "So what do you have to say?" "That's exactly what it is," Anderton said, quick to see the advantage of stating frankly what he believed to be the simple truth. "The prediction on the card was deliberately fabricated by a clique inside the police agency. The card is prepared and I'm netted. I'm relieved of my authority automatically. My assistant steps in and claims he prevented the murder of a usual efficient pre-crime manner. Needless to say, there's no murder or intent to murder." "I agree with you, there's not going to be a murder," Kaplan affirmed grimly. "You'll be in police custody, and I intend to make certain of that." Horrified, Anderton protested. "You're taking me back there? If I'm in custody, I'll never be able to prove—" "I don't care what you're able to prove or don't prove," Kaplan interrupted. "All I'm interested in is having you out of the way," frigidly added, "for my own protection." He was getting ready to leave. One of the men asserted. "That's right," Anderton said. "As soon as they get a hold of me, I'll be confined in the detention camp. Whitwer will take over, lock, stock, and barrel." His face darkened. And my wife. They're attacking in concert, apparently. For a moment, Kaplan seemed to waver. It's possible, he conceded, regarding Anderton steadily. Then he shook his head. I can't take the chance. If this is a frame against you, I'm sorry, but it's simply not my affair. He smiled slightly. However, I wish you luck. What an asshole. To the men, he said, take him to the police building and turn him over to the highest authority. He mentioned the name of the acting commissioner and waited for Anderton's reaction. Whitwer, Anderton echoed incredulously. Still smiling slightly, Kaplan turned and clicked on the console radio in the study. Whitwer has already assumed authority. Obviously, he's going to create quite an affair out of this. There was a brief static calm, and then abruptly the radio blared out into the room, a noisy professional video reading a prepared announcement. All citizens are warned not to shelter or any fashion aid this dangerous marginal individual. The extraordinary circumstance of an escaped criminal at the liberty and in a position to commit an act of violence is unique in modern times. All citizens are hereby notified that legal statutes still in force implicate any and all persons failing to cooperate fully with police in their task of apprehending J. Allison Anderton. To repeat, the Pre-Crime Agency and the federal West Block government is in the process of locating and neutralizing its former commissioner, John A. Anderton, who, through the methodology of the pre-crime system, is hereby declared a potential murderer, and as such forfeits its rights to freedom and all its privileges. It didn't take him long, Anderton muttered. Kaplan snapped off the radio and the voice vanished. At least the must have gone directly to him, Anderton speculated bitterly. Why should he wait? Kaplan said. You made your intentions clear. He nodded to his men. Take him back to town. I feel uneasy having him so close. In that respect, I concur with Commissioner Whitwer. I want him neutralized as soon as possible. So, are we just going to ignore also the whole fact that this is essentially, in this, like, story, you have essentially Laplace demons going on here? Like people who can calculate future events before they happen? Because let's say, right then and there, um, that they don't kill Anderton, that they just cut off his legs and his arms and just make him into a nugget, right? He can't commit a murder in that state. And they're technically not committing a murder. So I don't know if the precogs would even figure that one out. Or they do 100 other things. I mean, the precogs would have figured out that they would be able to apprehend this guy. So you basically have a way of forcing events to happen as you need them to, which is very interesting. Anyway, so we got this new guy, Leopold Kaplan, head of the, what did they say it was? AFWC, Agency of the Federal West Block Government. Okay, he's the head. They detained a man and then sent him back so that he can be further detained forever. Hmm. And since he's no longer the commissioner, he has no police immunity, ironically. So, yeah, I guess sucks to suck. You put away people for the same thing, and now you're protesting the same thing. Sucks when that happens. Okay, chapter 4, halfway through almost already. Cold, light rain beat against the pavement as the car moved through the dark streets of New York City towards the police building. You can see his point, one of the men said to Anderton. If you were in his place, you'd act just as decisively. Sullen and resentful, Anderton stared straight ahead. Anyhow, the man went on, you're just one of many, thousands of people who've gone to the detention camp. You won't be so lonely. As a matter of fact, you might not want to leave. Helplessly, Anderton watched pedestrians hurrying along the rain-swept sidewalks. He felt no strong emotion. He was aware that only of an overpowering fatigue. Dully, he checked off the street numbers. They were getting near the police station. This Whitworth seems to know how to take advantage of an opportunity, one of the men observed conversationally. Did you ever meet him? Briefly, Anderton answered. He wanted your job, so he framed you. Are you sure of that? Anderton grimaced. Does it matter? I was just curious. The man eyed him languidly. So you're the ex-commissioner of police. People in the camp will be glad to see you coming. Oh, they're gonna remember you. No doubt, Anderton agreed. Whitworth sure didn't waste any time. Kaplan's lucky with an official like that in charge. The man looked at Anderton almost pleadingly. You're really convinced it's a plot, eh? Of course. You wouldn't want to harm a Kaplan's head. For the first time in history, pre-crime goes wrong. An innocent man is framed by one of those cars. Maybe there have been other innocent people, right? It's quite possible, Anderton admitted listlessly. Maybe the whole system can break down. Sure, you're not going to commit a murder, or maybe none of them were. Is that why you told Kaplan you wanted to keep yourself outside? Were you hoping to prove the system wrong? I've got an open mind if you want to talk about it. Another man leaned over and asked, just between the two of us, is there really anything to this plot stuff? Are you really being framed? Anderton sighed. At that point, he wasn't certain himself. Perhaps he was trapped in a closed, mindless, meaningless time circle with no motive and no beginning. In fact, he was almost ready to concede that he was the victim of a weary, neurotic fantasy spawned by growing insecurity. Without a fight, he was willing to give himself up. A vast weight of exhaustion laid upon him. He was struggling to find against the impossible, and all the cards were stacked against him. Literally, though, because they get punched out onto the cards. The sharp squeal of the tires roused him. Frantically, the driver struggled to control the car, tugging at the wheel and slamming on the brakes. A massive bread truck loomed from the fog and ran directly across the lane ahead. Had he gunned down the motor instead, he might have saved himself, but too late he realized the error. The car skidded, lurched, and hesitated for a brief instant, and then smashed head-on into the bread truck. Under Eddington's seat lifted and flung him face forward against the door. Pain, sudden and intolerable, seemed to burst in his brain as he lay gasping and trying to feebly pull himself to his knees. Somewhere in the crackle of the fire echoed dismally a patch of hissing brilliance winkering in the swirls of mist making their way into the twisted hulk of the car. Hands from the outside of the car reached for him. Slowly, he became aware that he was being dragged through the rent that had been the door. A heavy seat cushion was shoved brusquely aside, and all at once he found himself on his feet, leaning against a dark shape and being guided into the shadows of an alley a short distance from the car. In the distance, police sirens wailed. You'll live. The voice grated in his ear, low and urgent. It was a voice he had never heard before, and as unfamiliar and as harsh as the rain beating into his face. Can you hear what I'm saying? Yes, Anderton acknowledged. He plucked aimlessly at the ripped sleeve of his shirt. A cut on his cheek was beginning to throb. Confused, he tried to orient himself. You're not— Stop talking and listen. The man was heavy-set, almost fat. Now his big hands held Anderton propped against the wall, the wet brick wall of the building, out of the rain and the flickering light of the burning car. We had to do it that way, he said. It was the only alternative. We don't have much time. We thought Kaplan would keep you at his place longer. Who are you? Anderton managed. The moist, rain-streaked face and turned into a humorless grin. My name's Fleming. You'll see me again. We have 5 seconds before the police gets here. Then we're back where we started. A flat packet was stuffed into Anderton's hands. That's enough to loot. That's enough loot to keep you going. And there's a full set of identification in there. will contact you from time to time. His grin increased, and he became a nervous chuckle. Until you've proved your point. Anderton blinked. It's a frame-up, then. Of course, sharply the man swore. You mean they got you to believe it, too? I thought Anderton had trouble talking. One of the front teeth seemed to be loose. Oh, Jesus Christ. Hostility toward Whitwer replaced my wife with and a younger man. Natural resentment. Don't kid yourself, the other said. You know better than that. This whole business was worked out carefully. They have every phase of it under control. The card was set to pop the day Whitwer appeared. They already got the first part wrapped up. Whitwer is commissioner, and you're a hunter criminal. Who's behind it? Your wife. Anderton's head spun. You're positive? The man laughed. You bet your life. He glanced quickly around. Here comes the police. Take off down this alley. Grab a bus. Get yourself into the slum section, rent a room, and buy yourself a stack of magazines to keep you busy. Get others clothes. You're smart enough to take care of yourself. Don't try to leave Earth. They've got all the intersystem transport screened. If you can keep low for the next 7 days, you're made. Who are you? Anderton demanded. Fleming let go of him. Cautiously, he moved to the entrance of the alley, peered out. The first car had come to rest on the damp pavement, its motor spinning tinily. It crept suspiciously toward the smoldering ruin that had been Kaplan's car. Inside the wreck of the squad of men were stirring feebly, beginning to creep painfully through the tangle of steel and plastic out in the cold rain. Consider us a private society, Fleming said softly, his plump, expressionless face shining with moisture. A sort of police force that watches the police to see that everything stays on an even keel. His thick hand shot out, stumbling. Anderton was knocked away from him, half falling into the shadows and damp debris that littered the alley. Get going, Fleming told him sharply, and don't discard that packet. As Anderton felt his way hesitantly toward the far exit of the alley, and the man's last word drifted to him, study it carefully, and you will still survive. I was right. I was right. As I said it, like, why would you suspect the first person to come in your life to be able to do all of this? It's so hard to gather information on someone that you're trying to kill if you don't already know them. You got to know the people, you got to know your target. I mean, that's the whole point of like intelligence agencies is that they do all that stuff, right? Um, and like normal people can't do that, so that's why like almost all murders, unless they are sociopaths, um, are committed by people who knew the other person. Um, or even like just setups in general, right? So interesting that his wife's the one. I think they said that she was his, yeah, know thy enemy. Because there's also another thing like keep your enemies, what is it? Keep your friends close, your enemies closer, or something like that. Because you never know, like the people who you spend the most time with generally have the most information about you. So you're more at risk of those people than people that you barely know. Um, what was I also gonna say? Oh, another thing. Fleming, this new guy that's coming to the story, I have a huge suspicion that Fleming is one of those precogs. My thoughts. I haven't watched any of this or anything like that. I'm not a precog myself, but I think high chance Fleming is a precog, and what it would be so funny if these precogs were literally just fucking around because they have nothing else to do, just singling out people that they figured out like a few times that they're gonna commit crimes, and then just started like saying like that's a job, right? And then there was some other people just like fucking with them from the shadows of other precog people. I don't know. It sounded better in my head before I said it. It sounded fucking stupid when I said it out loud. But I think precog. I think Fleming is a precog because who's gonna know that? Who's gonna? How can you combat this idea that they're going to precognate your murder without also being able to independently audit that? That's the thing here. They're peeking into time that nobody else has access to. So, and it's also people that the precogs don't even fucking know. I don't get this whole idea of how the precogs work. We're just gonna have to, I guess, accept that this is a possibility. But I'm very interested in the metaphysical consequences of their abilities. Um, Interestingly, if Lisa had put him up to it, then she had immediately not necessarily even picked up on the fact that he was like sweating and nervous, that he had read his own name on a card, but that she'd be so acutely aware to it. Now I know some people who know each other really, really well, and like some couples and all that. I'm gonna tell you, just based on my own fucking parents, ain't no way. To know that like far ahead, just to not assume that they're just generally having a bad day and all that, and to chase after them, kind of sus. Anyway, so current thoughts: Fleming precog, Whitwer some sort of fucking some kind of subplant or something like that, fucking taking over his job. I don't know what the point of this is, but still no motive. We're gonna figure out this motive in the next chapters here. Okay, chapter 5. The identification cards described him as Ernest Temple, an unemployed electrician drawing a weekly subsistence from the state of New York, with a wife and 4 children in Buffalo and less than $100 in assets. A sweat-stained green card gave him permission to travel to and to maintain no fixed address. A man looking for work needed to travel. He might have to go a long way. As he rode across town in the almost empty bus, Anderton studied the description of Ernest Temple. Obviously the cards had been made out with him in mind, for all measurements fitted. After a time he wondered about the fingerprints and the brainwave pattern. They couldn't possibly stand comparison. The wallet full of cards would get him past only the most cursory examinations. But it was something. And with the ID cards came $10,000 in bills. He pocketed the money and cards, then turned to the neatly typed message in which they had been enclosed. At first he could make no sense of it. For a long time he studied, perplexed. The existence of a majority logical implies a corresponding minority. The bus had entered the vast slum region. The tumbled miles of cheap hotels and broken down tenements that had sprung up after the mass destruction of the war. It slowed to a stop, and Anderton got to his feet. A few passengers idly observed his cut cheek and damaged clothing. Ignoring them, he sat down onto the rain-swept curb. Beyond collecting the money due to him, the hotel clerk was not interested. Anderton climbed the stairs to the second floor and entered the narrow, musty-smelling room that now belonged to him. Gratefully, he locked the door and pulled down the window shades. The room was small but clean. Bed, dresser, scenic calendar, chair, lamp, a radio with a slot for the insertion of quarters. He dropped a quarter into it and threw himself heavily down on the bed. All the main stations carried the police bulletin. It was novel, exciting, something unknown to the present generation, an escaped criminal. The public was avidly interested. "This man has used the advantage of his high position to carry out an initial escape," the announcer was saying, with a professional indignation. Oh, I should be reading this announcer voice. "Because of his high office, he had access to the preview data, and the trust placed on him permitted him to evade the normal process of detection and relocation. During the period of his tenure, he exercised his authority to send countless potential guilty individuals to the proper confinement, thus sparing the lives of the innocent victims. This man, John Allison Anderson, was instrumental in the original creation of the pre-crime system, a prophylactic pre-detection of criminals through the ingenious use of mutant precogs, capable of previewing future events and transferring orally that data into analytical machinery. These three precogs and their vital function." The voice faded as he left the room and entered the tiny bathroom. There he stripped off his coat and shirt and ran hot water in the washbowl. He began bathing at the cut on his cheek. At the drugstore on the corner he had bought iodine and band-aids, a razor, comb, toothbrush, and some small other things that he would need. The next morning he intended to find a second-hand clothing store and buy more suitable clothing. After all, he was now an unemployed electrician, not an accident-damaged commissioner of police. In the other room the radio blared on. Only subconsciously aware of it, he stood in front of the mirror, examining a broken tooth. The system of precogs finds its genesis in the computers of the middle decades of the century. How are the results of an electric computer checked? By feeding the data into a second computer of identical design. Both computers are not sufficient. If the computer arrived at a different answer, it is impossible to tell a priori which is correct. The solution, based on a careful study of statistical method, is to utilize a third computer to check the results of the first two. In this manner, a so-called majority report is obtained. It can be assumed with fair probability that the agreement of the two of the three computers indicates which alternative results is accurate. It would not be likely that two computers would arrive at identically incorrect solutions. Anderton dropped the towel he was clutching and raced into the other room. Trembling, he begged to catch the blaring words of the radio. "Unanimity, unanimity of the three precogs is a hoped-for but seldom achieved phenomenon," Acting Commissioner Whitwer explains. "It is much more common to obtain a collaborative majority report of two precogs, plus a minority report of some slight variation, usually with reference to time and place, from a third mutant. This is explained by the theory of multiple futures. If one time path existed, a precognitive information would be of no importance, since no possibility would exist, in possessing this information of altering the future. In the pre-crimes agency's work, we must first of all assume," frantically, Anderton paced around the tiny room, "majority report." Only two of the precogs had concurred on the material underlying the card. That was the meaning of the message enclosed with that packet. The report of the third precog, the minority report, was somehow of importance. Why? He watched. His watch told him that it was after midnight. Page would be off duty. He wouldn't be he wouldn't be back in the monkey block until the next afternoon. It was a slim chance, but worth taking. Maybe Page would cover for him, and maybe not. He'd have to risk it. He had to see the minority report. That's an interesting thought. I never actually thought about that. How you actually check if the computer is doing its like computations correctly. Hmm. I always thought that even like your computer on Linux, I thought like somehow maybe it runs some sort of like BIOS, like file system check or something like that. It checks like a shell hash to make sure things work. Um, but no, this makes sense. So basically, they're saying, um, The odds that it happens once, like an error randomly occurs in any machine, is very low, but still not zero. If you multiply it with the odds that another computer gets it wrong, then you've essentially squared the possibility of getting it wrong. So I think that's actually like how a lot of data centers and all that work as well. They have this huge guarantee called nine nines of durability, which basically says like if you own like 100 terabytes in it, like 100,000 files, and you store them for 1,000 days or something like that, that there only one of them will ever get damaged, on average. And so I think that's kind of what's happening here. If we say that one of them has like a 99.99% chance of getting it wrong, that's a lot actually to get wrong because you want to be fairly certain that you're putting someone in jail and ruining their entire life, that you got the correct guy. But if you mix it two of them, now you're talking. You got a huge like benefit to that. Now it's like 99.999999 chance that you get it right. So big ups. But here he's saying that there was a chance that um, the minority report, the one mutant that didn't get it wrong or get it right as the other two, is the saving grace, like the saving ball in this whole situation, which is an interesting thing to think about. I still have no idea who the fuck Paige is. I think we read about them earlier on. I don't remember what Paige does. Um, is Paige like the last name of like Lisa or something like that? I think so. Let me check. I think it was Lisa Page, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. Because I thought like we haven't I don't remember referring to anybody as Page, so it's Lisa Page here. Lisa Page, wife. Okay. It's kind of weird that you kind of have to like, I guess, yeah, just even calling her Paige, calling your wife by her last name. It's kind of weird. I guess if your wife framed you, fuck it. That bitch don't matter. We'll see. We'll see about that. I still think that it's like, why would you come out and say it if you already knew that they were gonna like do it and frame you? Why not put something in place if you actually care that much? As like from Fleming's point of view, we're gonna see. Well, we'll see. Okay, chapter 6. Between noon and 1 o'clock, the rubbish-littered streets swarmed with people. He chose that time, the busiest part of day, to make his call. Selecting a phone booth in a patron's teeming super drugstore, he dialed the familiar police number and stood holding the cold receiver to his ear. Deliberately, he had selected the odd, not the vid line. In spite of his second-hand clothing and seedy, unshaven appearance, he might be recognized. The receptionist was new to him. Cautiously, he gave Page his extension. If Whitwer were removing the regular staff and putting in his satellites, he might find himself talking to a total stranger. Hello? Page's gruff voice came. Relieved, Anderson glanced around. Nobody was paying attention to him. The shoppers wandered among the merchandise, going about their daily routines. Can you talk? He asked. Or are you tied up? There was a moment of silence. He could picture Page's mild face torn with uncertainty as he wildly tried to decide what to do. At last came halting words. Why why are you calling here? Ignoring the question, Anderson said, I don't recognize the receptionist. New personnel? Brand new, Page agreed, in a thin, strangled voice. Big turnovers these days. So I hear. Tensely, Anderson asked. How's your job? Still safe? Wait a minute. The receiver was put down and the muffled sounds of steps came in Anderson's ear. It was followed by a quick slam of the door being hastily shut. Paige returned. We can talk better now, she said. He said, wait, what? Wait a minute, the receiver. Oh, okay. I don't get who's closing the door. We can talk better now, he said hoarsely. How much better? Not a great deal. Where are you? Scrolling through Scrolling through Central Park, Anderson said, enjoying the sunlight. For all he knew, Page had gone to make sure that the line tap was in place. Right now, an airborne police team was probably on his way, but he had to take his chance. I'm new in the field, he said curtly. I'm an electrician these days. Oh? Page said, baffled. I thought maybe you had some work for me. If it can be arranged, I'd like to drop by and examine your basic computing equipment, especially the data and analytical banks in the monkey block. After a pause, Page said, it might be arranged if it's really important. It is, Anderson assured him. When would be best for you? Well, Page said strongly, I'm having a repair team come into the intercom equipment. The acting commissioner wants it improved so he can operate it quicker. You might trail along. I'll do that. About when? Say 4 o'clock. Entered speed, level 6. I'll meet you. Fine, Anderson agreed, already starting to hang up. I hope you're still in charge when I get there. He hung up and rapidly left the booth. A moment later, he was pushing through the dense pack of people crammed into the nearby cafeteria. Nobody would locate him there. He had 3.5 hours to wait, and it was going to seem a lot longer. It proved to be the longest wait of his life as before he finally met Paige as arranged. The first thing Paige said was, You're out of your mind. Why in the hell did you come back? I'm not back for long. Tautly, Anderton plowed through the monkey block, systematically locking one door after another. Don't let anybody in. I can't take any chances. You should have quit when you were ahead. In an agony of apprehension, Paige followed after him. Whitwer is making hay, hand over fist. He's got the whole country screaming for your blood. Ignoring him, Anderton snapped on the main control of the analytical machinery. Which of the three monkeys gave you the Minority Report? Don't question me, I'm getting out. On the way to the door, Page halted briefly, pointed to the middle figure, and then disappeared. The door closed. Anderton was alone. The middle one, he knew that one well. The dwarfed, hunched-over figure had sat up, buried in its wiring and relays for 15 years. As Anderton approached, it didn't look up. With eyes glazed and blank, it contemplated a world that did not yet exist, blind to the physical reality that lay around it. Jerry was 24 years old. Originally, he had been classified as a hydrocephalic idiot, but when he had reached the age of 6, the psych testers had identified the precog talent, buried under layers of tissue corrosion. Placed in a government-operated training school, the latent talent had been cultivated. By the time he was 9, the talent had advanced to a useful stage. Jerry, however, remained in the aimless chaos of idiocy. The burgeoning faculty had absorbed the totality of his personality. Squatting down, Anderton began disassembling the protective shields that guarded the tape reels stored in the analytical machinery. Using schematics, he traced the leads back up to the final stages of the integrated computers, to the point where Jerry's individual equipment branched off. Within minutes, he was shakily lifting out 2.5 hour tapes, recent rejected data not fused with the majority reports. Consulting the code chart, he selected the section of the tape which referred to his particular card. A tape scanner was mounted nearby. Holding his breath, he inserted the tape, activated the transport, and listened. It took only a second. For the first statement of the report, it was clear what had happened. He had what he wanted. He could stop looking. Jerry's vision was misphased. Because of the erratic nature of the precognition, he was examining a time area slightly different than from that of his companions. For him, the report that Anderton would commit a murder was an event to be integrated along with everything else. That assertion and Anderton's reaction was one more piece of the datum. Obviously, Jerry's report superseded the majority report. Having been informed that he would commit a murder, Anderton would change his mind and not do so. The preview of the murder had cancelled out the murder. The prophylaxis had occurred, simply in his being informed. Already a new time path had been created, but Jerry was outvoted. Trembling, Anderton rewound the tape and clicked on the recording head. At high speed, he made a copy of the report, restored the original, and removed the duplicate from the transport. Here was the proof that the card was invalid, obsolete. All he had to do was show it to Whitwer. His own stupidity amazed him. Undoubtedly, Whitwer had seen the report, and in spite of it, he had assumed the job of commissioner, had kept the police teams out. Whitwer didn't intend to back down. He wasn't concerned with Anderton's innocence. What then could he do? What else? Who else would be interested? You damn fool. A voice behind him grated, wild with anxiety. Quickly he turned. His wife stood at the doors in her police uniform, her eyes frantic with dismay. Don't worry, he told her briefly, explaining the tape of reel. I'm leaving. Her face distorted. Lisa rushed frantically up to him. Paige said that you were here, but I couldn't believe it. Oh, well, that's a fuck up on my part. Paige and Lisa are different people. Okay. Paige said you were here, but I couldn't believe it. He shouldn't have let you in. He just doesn't understand what you are. What am I? Anderson inquired caustically. Before you answer, maybe you better listen to this tape. I don't want to listen to it. I just want you to get out of here. Ed Whitwer knows somebody's down here. Peyton Page is trying to keep him occupied, but she broke off. Her head turned stiffly to one side. He's here now. He's going to force his way in. Haven't you got any influence? Be gracious and charming. He'll probably forget about me. Lisa looked at him in a bit of reproach. There's a ship parked on the roof. If you want to get away. Her voice choked for an instant. She was silent. Then she said, I'll be taking off in a minute or so if you want to come. I'll come, Anderson said. He had no other choice. He had secured his tape as proof, but he hadn't worked out any method of leaving. Gladly, he hurried after the slim figure of his wife as she strode from the block, through the side door, and down the supply corridor. Her heels clicked loudly as she did in the deserted gloom. It's a good fast ship, she told him over the shoulder. It's an emergency fueled, ready to go. I was going to supervise some of the teams. Interesting. Well, besides the fact that I messed up that Lisa and Paige were the same person, um, who the fuck is Paige? Sorry, I gotta figure this out. Who is Paige in the Minority Report? Wally Page is Anderton's subordinate who helps him break into the police station, but later turns out. Oh, I didn't read that. I genuinely did not read that. I read something about Army and then I immediately did the Control W on that. Hmm. So, where the fuck does Fleming come into this? Why did Fleming come into this? Why are there so many people already in the story? I don't get it. We're being inundated, and I don't really see a path, honestly, in the story. So let's review who we've met so far. We've met Anderton, Whitwer, Wally Page, his wife, then Anderton's wife Lisa, then Leopold Kaplan, Fleming, Like I just don't get I don't understand why Fleming is in this story necessarily. I kind of forgot like how those tapes actually affected Anderton. Um, like the material that Fleming gave him. And I'm also confused on Kaplan's role in this. What the fuck was the point of capturing him and then sending him back to the police board? Is it to prop up Ed Whitwer? Why does Ed Whitwer automatically assume that um, Anderton is culpable? I don't understand that. And why is he not guessing anything? So Ed definitely has to be some sort of fucking informant in this story because yeah, but why? It's like if you came into your like role and you got hired into a role, and then your boss was fired, and then you're just like, wait a fucking second, you can't just fire my boss. You're not gonna go and take your boss's position, right? So in some case, like I think that this means that Ed Whitwer is part of the enemies here, for sure is part of the enemies, or at least is just an opportunistic bastard. I'm gonna write that down. Some sort of like opportunistic bastard who is just taking such like advantage of this situation to further his goals. You know, maybe that's totally legit. I don't know. Um, I'm also considering the fact, yeah, again, Fleming never mentioned again. Kaplan, what could this be? Maybe a like an allure to the idea of fascism in some way? I don't know. Like, why the fuck would the army be interested in this? I also don't have the backstory of the world, so I can't really tell. Um, and then least the wife, right? I don't get that part. So she was working at the wife was working at the police with Anderton. She was his secretary, and now she's like helping him get out. He was the commissioner. Paige, the subordinate. What's the fucking story about precognition? Just the dangers of like like conceiving stuff and to take over of power. Um, of like limited information. I don't get it. Earlier on, I said that this had like elements of like psychopaths to it and whatnot. Um, I'm still hesitant on that. I'm growing hesitant on that now. I'm not entirely convinced that this is Psychopaths. That was a much more arc of a story than this is feeling right now, but we'll keep reading on. There's six more pages to tie up this book, so let's try to see what we can figure out here. Yeah. Okay, chapter 7. Behind the wheel of a high-velocity police cruiser, Anderton outlined what the minority tape contained. Lisa listened without comment, her face pinched and strained, her hands clasped tensely in her lap. Below the ship, the war-ravaged rural countryside spread out on like a relief map. The vacant regions between the cities, crater-pitted and dotted with the ruins of farms and small industrial plants. "I wonder," she said, when he had finished, "how many times this has happened before." "A minority report? A great many times. I mean one precog misphased, using the report of the others as data, superseding them." Her eyes, dark and serious, she added, "Perhaps a lot of the people in the camps are like you." "No," Anderton. "No, no," Anderton insisted, but he was beginning to feel uneasy about it too. "I was in a position to see the car, to look at the report. That's what did it." "But," Lisa gestured significantly, "perhaps all of them would have reacted that way. We could have told them the truth." "It would have been too great a risk," he answered stubbornly. Lisa laughed sharply. "Risk? Chance? Uncertainty? With precogs around?" Anderton concentrated on steering the fast little ship. "This is a unique case," he repeated, "and we have an immediate problem. We can tackle the theoretical aspects later on." I have to get this tape to the proper people before your bright young friend demolishes it. You've taken it to Kaplan? Of course I am. He tapped the reel of the tape which lay in the seat between them. He'll be interested. Proof that his life isn't in danger ought to be of vital concern to him. From her purse, Lisa shakily got out her cigarette case. And you'll think he'll help you. He may, or he may not. It's a chance worth taking. Sorry. How did you manage to go underground so quickly? Lisa asked. A completely effective disguise is difficult to obtain. All it takes is money, he answered evasively. As he smoked, Lisa pondered. Probably Kaplan will protect you. He's quite powerful. I thought he was only a retired general. Technically, that's what he is, but Whitwer got out the dossier on him. Kaplan heads an unusual kind of exclusive veterans organization. It's actually kind of a club, with a few restricted members, high officers only. An international class from both sides of the war. Here in New York, they maintain a great mansion of a house, three glossy paper publications, and an occasional TV coverage that costs them a small fortune. What are you trying to say? Only this. You've convinced me that you're innocent. I mean, it's obvious that you won't commit a murder, but you must realize that now the original report, the majority report, was not a fake. Nobody falsified it. At Whitworth didn't create it. There's no plot against you, and there never was. If you're going to accept this minority report as genuine, you'll have to accept the majority one also. Reluctantly, he agreed. I suppose so. Ed Whitwer, Lisa continued, is acting in a complete good faith. He really believes you're a potential criminal, and why not? He's got the majority report sitting on his desk. But you could have that card folded up in your pocket. I destroyed it, said quietly. Lisa leaned earnestly towards him. Ed Whitwer isn't motivated by any desire to get your job. He's motivated by the same desire that has always dominated you. He believes in pre-crime. He wants the system to continue. I've talked to him, and I'm convinced he's telling the truth. Anderson asked, Do you want me to take this reel to Whitwer? If I do, he'll destroy it. Nonsense, Lisa retorted. The originals have been in his hands from the start. He could have destroyed them at any time he wished. That's true, Anderson conceded. Quite possibly he didn't know. Of course he didn't. Look at it this way. If Kaplan gets a hold of that tape, the police will be discredited. Can't you see why? It'll prove that the majority report was an error. Ed Whipper is absolutely right. You'll have to be taken in if pre-crime is to survive. You're thinking out of your own safety, but think for a moment about the system. Leaning over, she stubbled out her cigarette and fumbled in her purse for another. Which means more to you, your own personal safety, or the existence of the system? My safety, Anderson answered without hesitation. You're positive? If the system can survive only by imprisoning innocent people, then it deserves to be destroyed. My personal safety is important because I'm a human being. And furthermore, from her purse, Lisa got out a tiny pistol. I believe, she told him huskily, that I have my finger on the firing release. I've never used this weapon before, but I'm willing to try. After a pause, Anderton asked, You want me to turn the ship around, is that it? Yes, back to the police building. I'm sorry, but if you could put the good of the system above your own selfish, keep your sermon, Anderton told her. I'll take the ship back, but I'm not going to listen to your defense of a code to behavior no intelligent man could subscribe to. Lisa's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Holding the pistol tightly, she sat facing him, her eyes fixed intently on him as he swung the ship in a broad arc. A few loose articles rattled from the glove compartment as the little craft turned on a radical slant. One wing rising majestically until it pointed up. Both Anderton and his wife were supported by the constraining metal arms of their seat, but not so the third member of the party. Out of the corner of his eye, Anderton saw a flash of motion. A sound came simultaneously. The clawing struggle of a large man as he abruptly lost his footing and plunged into the reinforced wall of the ship. What followed happened quickly. Fleming scrambled instantly to his feet, lurched Lurching and wary, one arm lashing out for the woman's pistol. Anderton was too startled to cry out. Lisa turned, saw the man, and screamed. Fleming knocked the gun from her hand, sending it clattering to the floor. Grunting, Fleming shoved her aside and retrieved the gun. Sorry, he gasped. I thought she might talk more, that's why I waited. You were here when Anderton began and stopped. It was obvious that Fleming had his men and his men had kept him under surveillance. The existence of Lisa's ship had been duly noted and factored in, and while Lisa had debated whether or not it would be wise to fly him to safety, Fleming had crept into the storage compartment of the ship. Perhaps, Fleming said, you'd better give me that reel of tape. His moist, clumsy fingers groped for it. You're right. Whitwer would have melted it down to a puddle. Kaplan too? Anderton asked numbly, still dazed by the appearance of the man. Kaplan is working directly with the Whitwer. That's why his name showed on line 5 of the card. Which one of them is the actual boss we can't tell, possibly neither. Fleming tossed the tiny pistol away and got out his own heavy-duty military weapon. You pulled a real flub in taking off with this woman. I told you she was back of this whole thing. I can't believe that, Anderton protested. You've got no sense. The ship was warmed up by the Whitworth's order. It wanted to fly you out of the building so that we couldn't get to you. With you on your own, separated from us, you didn't stand a chance. A strange look passed over Lisa's stricken features. It's not true, she whispered. Whitworth never saw this ship. I was going to supervise. You almost got away with it, Fleming interrupted inexorably. We'll be lucky if a police patrol ship isn't hanging on us. There wasn't time to check. He squatted down as he spoke, directly behind the woman's chair. The first thing is to get this woman out of the way. We'll have to drag you completely out of this area. Page tipped off Whitwer on your new disguise, and you can still be sure that it has been widely broadcast. Still crouching, Fleming seized hold of Lisa. Tossing his heavy gun to Anderson, he expertly tilted her chin up till the temple was shoved back into her seat. Lisa clawed frantically at him. A thin, terrified wail rose in her throat. Ignoring her, Fleming closed his great hands around her neck and began relentlessly to squeeze. No bullet wound, he explained, gasping. She's going to fall out. Natural accident. Happens all the time, but in this case her neck will be broken first. Okay. It seemed strange that Anderton waited so long. As it was, Fleming's thick ringers were cruelly embedded into the woman's pale flesh before he lifted the butt of the heavy-duty pistol and brought it down on the back of Fleming's skull. The monster's hands relaxed, staggered. Fleming's head fell forward, and he sagged across the wall of the ship. Trying feebly to collect himself, he began dragging his body upward. Anderton hit it with him again, this time above the left eye. He fell back and lay still. Struggling to breathe, Lisa remained for a moment huddled over, her body swaying back and forth. Then, gradually, the color crept back into her face. Can you take controls? Anderton asked, shaking her, his voice urgent. Yes, I think so. Almost mechanically, she reached for the wheel. I'll be all right. Don't worry about me. This pistol, Anderton said, is Army Ordnance issue, but it's not from the war. It's one of the useful new ones they've developed. I could be a long way off, but there's a chance. He climbed back to where Fleming lay spread out on the deck. Trying not to touch the man's head, he tore open his coat and rummaged in his pockets. A moment later, Fleming's sweat-sodden wallet rested in his hands. Todd Fleming, according to his identification, was an Army major attached to the Internal Intelligence Department of Military Information. Among the various papers was a document signed by General Leopold Kaplan, stating that Fleming was under a special protection of his own group, the International Veterans League. Fleming and his men were operating under Kaplan's orders. The bread truck, the accident, had been deliberately rigged. It meant that Kaplan had deliberately kept him out of police hands. The plan went back to the original contact in this home, when Kaplan's men had picked him up where he was packing. Incredulous, he realized what had really happened. Even then, they were making sure that they got to him before the police. From the start, it had been an elaborate strategy to make certain that Whitwer would fail to arrest him. So you were telling the truth, Anderton said to his wife as he climbed back in the seat. Can we get a hold of Whitwer? Mutely, she nodded, indicating the communication circuit of the dashboard. She said, What did you find? Get Whitwer for me. I want to talk to him as soon as I can. It's very urgent. Jerkily, she dialed, got the closed channel mechanical circuit, and raised police headquarters in New York. A visual panorama of petty police officers flashed by before a tiny replica of Ed Whitwer's features appeared on the screen. Remember me? Anderton asked him. Whitwer blanched. Good God, what happened? Lisa, are you bringing him in? Abruptly, his eyes fastened on the guns on Anderton's hands. Look, he said savagely, don't do anything to her. Whatever you may think, she's not responsible. I've already found that out, Anderton answered. Can you get a fix on us? We may need protection getting back. Back? Whitwer gazed at him unbelievingly. You're coming in? You're giving yourself up? I am, yes. Speaking rapidly and urgently, Anderton added, There's something that you must do immediately. Close off the monkey block. Make certain nobody gets it, Page or anyone else, especially army people. Kaplan, Miniature Image said. What about him? He was here. He just left. Anderton's heart stopped beating. What was he doing? Picking up data, transcribing duplicates of our precog reports on you. He insisted he wanted them solely for his protection. Then he's already got it, Anderton said. It's too late. Alarmed, Whitwer almost shouted, Just what do you mean? What's happening? I'll tell you, Anderton said heavily, when I get back to my office. Hmm, interesting. So we have a team here of the cops and the army, where you got Anderton on the cops, Lisa the secretary, Whitwer the appointee, Page is the subordinate. In the army, you have Kaplan as the head honcho and Fleming, Todd Fleming, as the subordinate major. Veterans League. I don't know what the significance of that is yet. Um, and I still don't have a motive. Why would Kaplan do this? Is it purely just to seize power? I mean, well, what's the point of that? If you're the army, you have infinitely many more resources than the cops. I mean, if I can take any fucking country right now, there's no way you're gonna get um there's no way cops are ever gonna stand up to military police vehicles or anything like that. So yeah, I'm not sure on the motive, but it does tie everybody back in quite nicely that we needed for the story. Um so basically he came in to take the tapes. Paige let him in, closed the door. He Whitwer was gonna find him, so Lisa took him away, and then she pulled out a gun and told him to get back. Fleming was fucking hiding in the hell on the ship as like some sort of like parasite, just thinking in the corner. Um, Weird. Um, and so what? They wanted to fly away and just get their hands on that minority report so that they discredit the cops? But for what reason do they have to discredit the cops? The only thing I can think of is power control seizing. This is the last chapter here, so maybe we'll get hopefully some answers to some of that. The story had a lot less to do with precogs than I originally had hoped. Um, Still an interesting thought. Yeah. Let's see what happens on this last 3 pages of the chapter 8. Whitwer met him on the roof of the police building. As the small ship came to a rest, a cloud of escort ships dipped their fins and sped off. Anderton immediately approached the blonde-haired young woman. "You got what you wanted," he told him. "You can lock me up, send me to the detention camp, but that won't be enough." Whitwer's blue eyes were pale with uncertainty. "I'm afraid I don't understand." "It's not my fault. I should have never left the police building. Where's Wally Page?" "We already clamped down on him," Whitwer replied. "He won't give us any trouble." Anderton's face was grim. "You're holding him for the wrong reason," he said. "Let me into the monkey block was Letting me into the monkey block was no crime, but passing information to the army is. You've had an army plant working here." He corrected himself a little lamely. "I mean, I have. I've called back the order on you. Now the teams are looking for Kaplan. Any luck?" "He left here in an army truck. We followed him, but the truck got into a militarized barracks. Now they've got a big wartime R3 tank blocking the street. It would be civil war to move it aside." Slowly, hesitantly, Lisa made her way from the ship. She was still pale and shaken, and on her throat was an ugly bruise was forming. "What happened to you?" Whitwer demanded. Then he caught sight of Fleming's inert form lying spread out on the inside. Facing Anderton squarely, he said, "Then you finally stop pretending this is some sort of conspiracy of mine." "I have." "You don't think I'm plotting to get your job?" "Sure you are. Everybody is guilty of that sort of thing. And I'm plotting to keep it. But that's something else, and you're not responsible." "Why do you assert?" Whitwer inquired. "I thought it's too late to turn yourself in. My God will put you in the camp. The week will pass and Kaplan will still be alive." "He'll be alive, yes," Anderton conceded, "but he can prove he'd be just as alive if I were walking the streets. He has the information that proves the majority report is obsolete. He will break this crime system. Heads or tails, he wins and we lose. The army discredits us, but their strategy paid off." "But why are they risking so much? What exactly do they want?" "After the Anglo-Sino War, the army lost out. It isn't what it was in the good old Afwa days. They ran the complete show, both military and domestic, and they did their own police work." "Like Fleming," Lisa said faintly. "After the war, the West Bloc was demilitarized. Officers like Kaplan were retired and discarded. Nobody likes that." Anderson grimaced. "I can sympathize with him. He's not the only one. But we couldn't keep on running things that way. We had to divide up the authority." "You say Kaplan has won," Whitwer said. "Is there anything we can do?" "I'm not going to kill him. We know it and he knows it. Probably he'll come around and offer us some kind of deal. We'll continue to function, but the Senate will abolish our real pull. You wouldn't like that, would you?" "I should not. I should say not," Whitwer answered emphatically. "One of these days I'm going to be running this agency." He flushed. "Not immediately, of course." Anderton's expression was somber. "It's too bad you publicized the majority report. If you had kept it quiet, we could cautiously draw it back in, but now everyone's heard about it. We can't retract it now." "I guess so," Whitwer admitted awkwardly. "Maybe I don't have this job down as neatly as I imagined." "You will, in time. You'll be a good police officer. You believe in the status quo, but learn to take it easy." Anderton moved away from them. "I'm going to study the data tapes on the majority report. I want to find out how I was supposed to kill Kaplan." Reflectively, he finished, "I might might give me some ideas." The data tapes of the precogs Donna and Mike were separately stored. Choosing the machinery responsible for the analysis of Donna, he opened the protective shield and laid out the contents. As before, the code informed him which reels were relevant, and in a moment he had the tape transport mechanism in operation. It was approximately what he had suspected. This was the material utilized by Jerry. This superseded time path. In it, Kaplan military intelligence agents kidnapped Anderton as they drove home from work. taken to Kaplan's villa, the organization GHQ of the International Veterans League. Atherton was given an ultimatum: voluntarily disband the pre-crime system or face open hostilities with the army. In this discarded time path, Atherton, as the police commissioner, had turned to the Senate for support. No support was forthcoming. To avoid civil war, the Senate had ratified the dismemberment of the police system and decreed a return to military law to cope with the emergency. Taking a corps of fanatic police, Atherton had located Kaplan and shot him, along with the other officials of the Veterans League. Only Kaplan had died, the other had been patched up, and the coup had been successful. This was Donna. He rewound the tape and turned to the material previewed by Mike. It would be identical. Both precogs had combined to present a unified picture. Mike began as Donna had begun. Atherton had become aware of Kaplan's plot against the police. But something was wrong. Puzzled, he ran back the tape to the beginning. Incomprehensibly, it did not jibe. Again, he relayed the tape, listening intently. The Mike report was quite different from the Donna report. An hour later, he had finished the examination and put away the tapes and left the monkey block. As soon as he emerged, Whitwer asked, "What's the matter?" I can see something's wrong." "No," Anderson answered slowly. Not exactly wrong." A sound came to his ears. He walked vaguely over to the window and peered out. The street was crammed with people. Moving down the center lane was a four-column line of uniformed troops, rifles, helmets, marching soldiers in their dingy wartime uniforms, carrying the cherished pennants of Afwa flapping in the cold afternoon wind. "An army rally," Whitwer explained bleakly. "I was wrong. They're not going to make a deal with us." "Why should they? Kaplan's going to make it public." Atherton felt no surprise. "He's going to read the Minority Report?" "Apparently. They're going to demand the Senate to disband us and take away our own authority. They're going to claim that we've been arresting innocent men, nocturnal police raids, that sort of thing. Rule by terror." "You suppose the Senate will yield?" Whitwer hesitated. "I wouldn't want to guess." "I'll guess," Anderton said. "They will. That business out there fits with what I've learned downstairs. We've got ourselves boxed in, and there's only one direction we can go. Whether we like it or not, we'll have to take it." His eyes had a steely glint. Apprehensively, Whitwer asked, "What is it?" "Once I say it, you'll wonder why you didn't invent it. Very obviously, I'm going to have to fulfill the publicized report. I'm going to have to kill Kaplan. That's the only way we can keep them from discrediting us." "But," Whitwer said, astonished, "the majority report has been superseded." "I can do it," Anderton informed him, "but it's going to cost. You're familiar with the statutes governing first-degree murder? Life imprisonment. At least, you could pull a few wires and get it commuted to exile. I could be sent out to one of those colony planets, the good old frontier." "Would you prefer that?" "Hell no," Anderson said heartily, "but it'll be a lesser of the two evils, and it's got to be done." "I don't see how you can kill Kaplan." Anderton got out the heavy-duty military weapon that Fleming had tossed him. "I'll use this." "They won't stop you?" "Why should they? They've got a minority report that says I've changed my mind." "Then the minority report is incorrect." "No," Anderton said, "it's absolutely correct. But I'm going to murder Kaplan anyhow." He had never killed a man. He had never seen a man killed. And he had been police commissioner for 30 years. For this generation, deliberate murder had died out. It simply didn't happen. A police car carried him to within a block of the army rally. There, in the shadows of the back seat, he painstakingly examined the pistol Fleming had provided him. It seemed to be intact. Actually, there was no doubt of the outcome. He was absolutely certain of what would happen within the next half hour. Putting the pistol back together, he opened the door of the parked car and stepped warily out. Nobody paid the slightest attention to him. Surging masses of people pushed eagerly for war, trying to get within hearing distance of the rally. Army uniforms predominated at the perimeter of the cleared area. A line of tanks and major weapons was displayed. Formidable armament was still in production. Army had erected a metal speaker stand and ascending steps. Behind the stand hung the vast Afwa banner, emblem of the combined powers that had fought in the war. By a curious corrosion of time, the Afwa Veterans League included officers from the wartime enemy, but a general was a general, and fine distinctions had faded over the years. Occupying the first rows of seats sat the high brass of the Afwa command. Behind them, the junior commissioned officers. Regimental banners swirled in a variety of colors and symbols. In fact, the occasion had taken on the aspect of a festive pageant. On the raised stand itself sat stern-faced dignitaries of the Veterans League, all of them tense with expectancy. At the extreme edges, almost unnoticed, waited a few police units, ostensibly to keep order. Actually, they were informants making observations. If orders were kept, the army would maintain it. The late afternoon wind carried the muffled mooing of many people packed tightly together. As Anderton made his way through the dense mob, he was engulfed by the solid presence of humanity. An eager sense of anticipation held everybody rigid. The crowd seemed to sense that something spectacular was on the way. With difficulty, Anderton forced his way past the rows of seats and over to the tight knot of army officials at the edge of the platform. Kaplan was among them. But now he was General Kaplan. The vest, the gold pocket watch, the cane, the conservative business suit, all were gone. For this event, Kaplan had got his old uniform from its mothballs. Straight and impressive, he stood surrounded by what had been his general staff. He wore his service bars, his medals, his boots, his decorative short sword, his visored cap. It was amazing how he had transformed a bald man had became under the stark potency of an officer's peaked and visored cap. Noticing Anderton, General Kaplan broke away from the group and strode to where the younger man was standing. The expression on his thin, mobile countenance showed how his incredulous glad he was to see the commissioner of the police. "This is a surprise," he informed Anderton, holding out a gray-gloved hand. "It was my impression that you had been taken in by the acting commissioner." "I'm still out," Anderton answered shortly, shaking hands. "After all, Whitwer has the same reel of tape." He indicated the package Kaplan clutched in his steely fingers and met the man's gaze confidently. In spite of his nervousness, General Kaplan was in good humor. "This is a great occasion for the army," he revealed. "You'll be glad to hear that I'm going to give the public a full account of the spurious charge brought against you." "Fine," Anderton answered noncommittally. "It will be made clear that you were unjustly accused." General Kaplan was trying to discover what Anderton knew. "Did Fleming have an opportunity to acquaint you with the situation?" "To some degree," Anderton replied. "You're only going to read the minority report? That's all you've got there?" "I'm going to compare it to the majority report." General Kaplan signaled an aide, and a leather briefcase was produced. "Everything is here, all the evidence we need. You don't mind being an example, do you? Your case symbolizes the unjust arrest of countless individuals." Stiffly, General Kaplan examined his wristwatch. "I must begin. Will you join me on the platform?" "Why?" Coldly, but with a kind of repressed vehemence, General Kaplan said, "so they can see living proof. You and I together, the killer and his victim, standing side by side, exposing the whole sinister fraud to which the police have been operating." "Gladly," Anderton agreed. "What are we waiting for?" Disconnected, General Kaplan moved toward the platform. Again he glanced uneasily at Anderton, as if visibly wondering why he had appeared and what he really knew. His uncertainty grew as Anderton winningly mounted the steps of the platform and found himself a seat directly beside the speaker's podium. "You fully comprehend what I'm going to be saying?" General Kaplan demanded. "This exposure will have considerable repercussions. It may cause the Senate to reconsider the basic validity of the pre-crime system." "I understand," Anderson answered, arms folded. "Let's go." A hush had descended on the crowd, but there was a restless, eager stirring when General Kaplan obtained the briefcase and began arranging his material in front of him. "This man standing at my side," he began in a clean-clipped voice, "is familiar to you all. You may be surprised to see him, for until recently he was described by the police as a dangerous killer." The eyes of the crowd focused on Anderton. Avidly, they peered at the only potential killer that they had ever been privileged to see at close range. "Within the last few hours, however," General Kaplan continued, "the police order for his arrest has been cancelled. Because the former commissioner, Anderton, voluntarily gave himself up? No, that is not strictly accurate. He is sitting here. He has not given himself up, but the police are no longer interested in him. John Allison Anderton is innocent of any crime in past, present, and future. The allegations against him were patent frauds, diabolical distortions of a contaminated penal system based on a false premise, a vast impersonal engine of destruction grinding men and women to their doom." Fascinated, the crowd glanced from Kaplan to Anderton. Everyone was familiar with the basic situation. "Many men have been seized and imprisoned under the so-called prophylactic pre-crime structure," General Captain continued, his voice gaining feeling and strength, "accused not of the crimes they have committed, but of the crimes they will commit. It is asserted that these men, if allowed to remain free, will at some future time commit felonies. But there can be no valid knowledge about the future. As soon as a precognitive information is obtained, it cancels itself out. The assertion that this man will commit a future crime is paradoxical. The very act of possessing this data renders it spurious. In every case, without exception, the report of the three police precogs has invalidated their own data. If no arrests have been made, there would still have been no crimes committed." Anderton listened idly, only half hearing the words. The crowd, however, listened with great interest. General Kaplan was now gathering up a summary made of the Minority Report. He explained what it was and how it had come into existence. From his coat pocket, Anderton slipped out his gun and held it in his lap. Already, Kaplan was laying aside on the Minority Report the precognitive material obtained from Jerry. His lean, bony fingers groped for the summary of first Donna, and after that Mike. "This was the original majority report," he explained. "The assertion made by two precogs that Anderton would commit a murder. Now here is the automatically invalidated material. I shall read it to you." He whipped out his rimless glass, fitted them to his nose, and started slowly to read. A queer expression appeared on his face. He halted, stammered, and abruptly broke off. The papers fluttered from his hands. Like a cornered animal, he spun, crouched, and dashed from the speaker's stand. For an instant his distorted face flashed past Anderson. On his feet now, Anderton raised the gun, stepped quickly forward, and fired. Tangled up in the rows of feet projecting from the chairs that filled the platform, Kaplan gave a single shrill shriek in agony and fright. Like a ruined bird, he tumbled, fluttering and flailing, from the platform to the ground below. Anderton stepped to the railing, but it was already over. Kaplan, as the majority report had asserted, was dead. His thin chest was a smoking cavity of darkness, crumbling ash that broke loose as the body lay twitching. Sickened, Anderton turned away and moved quickly between the rising figures of the stunned army officers. The gun, which he still held, guaranteed that he would not be interfered with. He leapt he leaped from the platform and edged into the chaotic mass of people at its base. Stricken, horrified, they struggled to see what had happened. The incident, occurring before their very eyes, was incomprehensible. It would take time for acceptance to replace blind terror. At the periphery of the crowd, Anderton was seized by waiting police. "You're lucky to get out," one of them whispered to him as the car crept cautiously ahead. "I guess I am," Anderton replied remotely. He settled back and tried to compose himself. He was trembling and dizzy. Abruptly, he leaned forward and was violently sick. "The poor devils! The poor devil," one of the cops murmured sympathetically. Through the swirls of misery and nausea, Anderton was unable to tell whether the cop was referring to Kaplan or to himself. Four burly policemen assisted Lisa and John Anderton in the packing and loading of their possessions. In 50 years, the ex-commissioner of police had accumulated a vast collection of material goods. Somber and pensive, he stood watching the procession of crates on the way to the waiting trucks. By the truck they would go directly to the field, and from there to the Centaurus X by intersystem transport. A long trip for an old man, but he wouldn't have to make it back. "There goes the second from the last crate," Lisa declared, absorbed and preoccupied by the task. In sweater and slacks she roamed through the barren rooms, checking on the last-minute details. "I suppose we won't be able to use these new electronic appliances. They're still using electricity on Centen." "I hope you don't care too much," Anderton said. "We'll get used to it," Lisa replied, and gave him a fleeting smile. "Won't we?" "I hope so." "You're positive you have no regrets?" If I thought. "No regrets," Lisa assured him. "Now suppose you help me with this crate?" As they boarded the lead truck, Whitwer drove up in a patrol car. He leapt out and hurried up to them, his face looking strangely haggard. "Before you take off," he said to Anderton, "you'll have to give me a breakdown on the situation with the precogs. I'm getting inquiries from the Senate. They want to find out if in the middle report the retraction was an error or what." Confusedly, he finished, "I still can't explain it. The minority report was wrong, wasn't it?" "Which minority report?" Anderton inquired, amused. Whitwer blinked. "Then that is it. I might have known." Seated in the cabin of the truck, Anderton got out his pipe and shook tobacco in it. With Lisa's lighter, he ignited the tobacco and began operations. Lisa had gone back to the house, wanting to be sure nothing vital had been overlooked. "There were three minority reports," he told Whitwer, enjoying the young man's confusion. Some day Whitwer would learn not to wade in the situations he didn't fully understand. Satisfaction was Anderton's final emotion. Old and worn out as he was, he had been the only one to grasp the real nature of the problem. "The three reports were consecutive," he explained. "The first was Donna. In that time path, Kaplan told me of the plot, and I promptly murdered him. Jerry, faced slightly ahead of Donna, used her report as data. He factored in my knowledge of the report. In that, the second time path, all I wanted to do was to keep my job. It wasn't Kaplan I wanted to kill, it was my own life, it was my own position in life I was interested in." "And Mike was the third report? That came after the minority report?" Whitworth corrected himself. "I mean, it came last?" "Mike was the last of the three, yes. Faced with the knowledge of the first report, I decided not to kill Kaplan. That produced report two, but faced with that report, I changed back my mind. Report two, situation two, was the situation Kaplan wanted to create. It was to the advantage of the police to recreate position one, and by that time I was thinking of the police. I had figured out what Kaplan was doing. The third report invalidated the second one in the same way the second one invalidated the first. That brought us back to where we started from. Lisa came, breathless and gasping. Let's go. We're all finished here. Lithe and agile, she ascended the metal rungs of the truck and squeezed in beside her husband as the driver and the driver. The latter obediently started up his truck, and the others followed. Each report was different, Anderton concluded. Each report was unique. But two of them agreed on one point. If left free, I would kill Kaplan. That created the illusion of a majority report. Actually, that's all it was, an illusion. Donna and Mike preview the same event, but in two totally different time paths, occurring under totally different situations. Donna and Jerry, the so-called minority report, and half of the majority report were incorrect. Of the three, Mike was correct, since no report came after his to invalidate him. That sums it up. Anxiously, Whitworth trotted along beside the truck, his smooth, blond face creased with worry. Will it happen again? Should we overhaul the setup? It can happen in only one circumstance, Anderton said. My case is unique, since I had access to the data. It could happen again, but only to the next police commissioner, so watch your step. Briefly he grinned, deriving no inconsiderable comfort from Whitworth's strained expression. Beside him, Lisa's lips twitched and her hand reached out and closed over his. Better keep your eyes open, he informed young Whitworth. It might happen to you at any time. And that's the story. Okay, interesting. So, the Minority Report is actually the Minority Reports. And there was never a majority report. It was just two minorities that just aligned on one part. Well, it's the government. Motherfucker, it's the government. It's the government of Canada. There's no, they just agree, like liberals and NDP agree on something, and that's how they form a majority. But in actuality, this is a minority government. They're all minorities. Okay. Do you know what I think it is? And I think this is very insightful of the book itself. It makes sense at the end, right? When you read it, when you know about all this. But as you're learning all this, the author definitely manipulated this story in a way that you couldn't figure this out on your own, right? They purposely left out some of the information here, um, because incorrect in saying this? I'm pretty sure when Anderton went in, he viewed both of their reports and then had a smile on his face or something like that. I might be misremembering that, but I think that came up in the story. And I think it brings up a good point here. You're too lost in the sauce. I think that's it. If you're too lost in the sauce, you lose track of what's actually going on. And it's only from the end that you can actually tell what was true and what had happened. Um, yeah, I actually don't know how well I articulated that, but that's kind of like my thinking as well. Another thing I'm thinking too is two wrongs make a right, I guess. I don't know. That's a one way to take about it. I don't think that's a fairly like noble output that you can take from this book, but it definitely is some output that you can take from this book. Um, yeah, I'm interested to know what you think about that. But it was a good story. It did actually take the 1.5 hours that it said it would. So good on that website for letting know giving a good estimate of the number of words and how long it would take. But yeah, I think like the author during this whole time was basically like misconstruing the data and hiding information so that you kept thinking that someone was something else, someone was something else. Um, like first they had pinned it on his wife, and then they pinned it on Whitwer, and then they pinned it on Kaplan, right? They kept shifting it onto your feet. You didn't know what the fuck was going on because you didn't have all the info. And so you kept coming to these wrong conclusions all along the path. But if you had all the info and you had hindsight, it would be a lot easier. And I think that's what this story is trying to say. That that there's some level of foresight, um, or hindsight that we always envy. And because of that, um, we're always in the dark in the moment. And I think it comes back to even just like right now, what's going on with like the fucking Trump tariffs and all that. Like as an outsider, but as someone who lives in Canada myself, as an outsider, I generally don't have any real clue why this could be happening. And the narrative keeps switching. It keeps switching under our feet. And we never can tell what's the truth and what's actually being fed to us. And because of that, we're always going to be one step behind on this stuff, no matter what we do. And there might be a set of people who are making correct assertions, but um, at any one point, they are their own minority. And it's only when you look back and you say, well, shit, this guy said it back then, or this guy said it back then you're always like left burned. Because remember, at each point of these reports coming to like fruition, each of them were its own minority report, meaning each of them would have gone undiagnosed under the radar. It's only when we take a look at all these nine reports and we see like the two that line up and we say, well, it was obvious, right? It's not. It's not. At every single point, these were minority reports. Nobody actually believed these people. Nobody listened to them. And that's why this situation got so manipulated. That's my take on it. It's a good book. Thanks to the recommendation. I might watch the movie after this to see kind of like how they draw all this up. But no, it's very interesting to read this book. Hmm, let's see what online says about this sort of stuff. Let's see. Yeah. What are the differences with it? Is it just like, let's see, Minority Report synopsis. John Allison Anderton was an aging creator and the head of the police commissioner, precogs. Yep, yep. Oh, here we go. While the farm, they use DC, but the actual place is New York. Late 30s, handsome drug addict. What the fuck? Where do they get drug addicts from? Addington's wife is story is named Lisa, while his ex-wife in the film is named Laura. Oh, okay, so this is just creating more drama. Okay, that makes sense. And the short story, the precogs can see crimes, not just murder, and the movie precogs can clearly only see murder. Future victim is Leonard Kaplan. Okay, not gonna read the rest of it to spoil it for myself. Um, yeah, Minority Report. I want to see what the other people wrote about it. Um, yeah, let's see. Main message. The main theme of the Minority Report is the classic philosophical debate of free will versus determinism. I don't know. That seems very straightforward. I personally wouldn't have chosen that one. I'd like to like tie things back into our daily lives because I think that makes them more impactful. Well, let's read this. Hmm. So let's see. It's free will and determinism. The main theme of the Minority Report is the classic philosophical debate of free will versus determinism. One of the main questions of the film raises is whether the future is set or whether free will can alter the future. As critic C.A. Wolski commented, at the outset, Minority Report promises to mine some deep subject matter to do with. Do we possess free will or are we predestined to our fate? I think just even reading that, that sounds stupid, sort of, because, okay, yeah, I wonder if those are like within like the time span that I could do within like a 3 hour stream. Um, Paycheck, Total Recall. I've heard of, I also have not watched any of those, to be honest with you. I know. This is kind of sad on my part. Um, oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I haven't watched any either of those movies. Um, but yeah, probably should start. I don't actually know all about, I didn't know anything about PKD until reading this book. So thanks for that recommendation. Um, yeah, I guess just didn't ever come up in school or anything like that. Interestingly, I've heard of a lot of authors. I've never heard of PKD. Um, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I have seen both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, I think it was. Yeah, I've seen both of those. First one definitely much better than the second in my opinion. From what I remember, it was much better. There were some weird parts in the second one with him like going to that sand place. But the death on the stairs is a classic. Fucking like Yagami kind of style death. Um, yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, though, I really do think like the themes that come out of this were much more interesting. There's this show called Psychopaths, um, which is essentially some effects the same as this one, where you have these people who join the police task force, and they are basically in charge of enforcing what the mind says to do, the collective mind. So there's this like this group of like this computer that dictates someone's psycho level. And it's essentially, I guess, like a movie based on this idea. But this one has like a much more like nuanced twist of the story, where the theme here says that um take away the accusation, no one would be committing a criminal act. The prediction drives the act, a self-fulfilling prop. Well, I guess they do say it here. And that's the kind of the same idea that Psychopaths is saying, that if you don't give them the idea, they never would have done it. And here it's like when you tell them that their psycho level is 100, it'll immediately jump to 150 because they're going to be denying it. Obviously, they're going to fucking deny that they're psychos. But then the computer just says, well, that's what a fucking psychopath would have said. It's like the witch hunt kind of fucking trials, sort of. And because their heart rate goes up and everything like that, then they're like, oh, I don't know, buddy. You seem pretty psychotic to me. And then if you stay calm, oh, look, he didn't say anything. He didn't fucking disagree. He's obviously a psycho. Um, yeah, really, really good story, this one. By far one of my top favorite animes beyond beyond Steins Gate and Death Note was definitely this one. Very, very good. I would even say this is better than Attack on Titan because Attack on Titan's like ending honestly felt like very nihilistic in its output, but I feel like this Psychopass one really dives deep into this like psychological fucking analyzation of like um you can't how do you deny yourself that you're not crazy? How do you prove you're not crazy? Uh, that's kind of like the theme here. So it's not necessarily like denouncing just general broad accusations. It's how do you prove yourself not crazy um to a system. And this whole idea of like the pre-crime systems, like at least that one in Psychopaths, it's actually very like plausible how they actually came to the conclusions that people were psychopathic here. This like whole idea of like precognitive beings just kind of seems kind of like weird. I would have much preferred it to not be people or mutants, and I would have much preferred it to be machines here. Just like fucking IBM Watson over here telling you you're a little sus, buddy. I saw into the future. I played AI, so you're gonna kill somebody. I would have much preferred that than this idea of there's precognitive beings just mindlessly talking to themselves. But yeah, okay. I think I'm gonna write down my ideas here, and I'm probably just gonna make a small little blog post about it, about what I thought. But this no, it's good. Um, and yeah, just to summarize that real quick again, it's just going to be basically the idea that hindsight. I think that's what I'm going to do my take on it. On that, we always look back um, to uh, we're always following the herd. Socially, we always follow the majority herd, but maybe at every single time point, we should be studying the minorities and looking back on them to see how they affected things. Just look at today's stock, see what happened, see in the future how much of that was actually manipulated or real. What was it like? Was it totally expected, or could you like predict in the future? And I think that's a nice take on it, on the moral of the story. Anyway, it's almost 8:30, so I think we're gonna wrap this up. Um, do you want to stay or do you want to leave? Do you want me to try to rate someone? I've actually never rated anybody on Twitch. I don't even know if you can rate people, but also, how do you think of this kind of layout I got here? I set this all up in OBS, so just the second stream I got this up and running. Yeah, nice. Yeah, thanks. I'm gonna see if I can get like there was this one is probably yeah, of course. I'll do this one next week on Saturday. That's usually when I have these. I was just this past yesterday was very busy, but yeah, I'll I'll do an announcement of when I'll do the next one on Saturday. But shoot me a message if you have a good one to do for next time. I think we'll probably do some of those three that you've mentioned there. If you have a particular one you want me to do, I'll do that one. But I think I have all of them in the the EPUB I have on my machine. So yeah. Anyway, cheers. Have a good one. And we'll see you on Tuesday when I'll be doing some coding. Okay. Bye now.